One of the biggest failures we saw during COVID was a failure of the church to stand up. If you're a Christian pastor and you get word that death is coming, there's a virus coming, it's going to kill lots of people, which let's remember, that's what the propaganda was. If you're a Christian pastor and your response to that is to shut your doors and tell people to go and ask Centrelink for help, then I put it to you that you don't understand what it means to be a Christian pastor. You don't understand what it means to be the custodian of the truths and the keys of life, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I believe that the church in Australia is committing idolatry. We have replaced God with the government.
Now we move on to one of Victoria's biggest criminals, Topher Field. What brings you here to Brisbane? Why are you following me around the country?
Well, look, it's
actually around the world. You're another one.
Well, look, it's all downhill from here. You know they're scraping the bottom of the barrel when they get me on, and when they have Avi doing the interviews, obviously. No, look, this is one of the highlights of my year, to be quite honest, and it does feel a little bit like getting the band back together. And people criticise conferences and criticise events like this. Oh, it's just a talk fest. Oh, it's just a bunch of people that already agree with each other. Well, come along sometime, because what you're going to find is actually, no, this isn't a room full of people that agree with each other. This is a room full of people that tend to align in what their values are and what they believe the direction we believe we ought to be going in. But there is a wide range of opinion on how we ought to get there and what the priorities ought to be. And really we're here to sharpen each other, to challenge each other, and we're here to inspire each other and spur each other on.
And why is it important to have church and state and other conferences like this?
Yeah, well, conferences themselves, they're about a battle of ideas, and I discussed that earlier, but church and state specifically I think is one of the most important ones that's going around at the moment, because one of the biggest failures we saw during COVID was a failure of the church to stand up. And I'm just going to say this brutally. If you're a Christian pastor and you get word that death is coming, there's a virus coming, it's going to kill lots of people, which let's remember, that's what the propaganda was. It wasn't true, but that's what the propaganda was. If you're a Christian pastor and your response to that is to shut your doors and tell people to go and ask Centrelink for help, then I put it to you that you don't understand what it means to be a Christian pastor. You don't understand what it means to be the custodian of the truths and the keys of life, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So what we saw from the church reflects not only a failure morally, in my opinion, but actually a complete failure of faith. And so we need to talk about this. We need to actually get really, really real. What I believe has happened, and what I said in my keynote speech last year at last year's Church and State Summit, is I believe that the church in Australia is committing idolatry. We have replaced God with the government. We've allowed the government, if you look at the Old Testament, you look at the names that God gives himself, Jehovah Jireh, as our provider, Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Nisi, Jehovah Tzidkenu, etc. All of these names have meanings. Every single one of those meanings has now been taken over by government, and churches have allowed that to happen. The government educates us, whereas God's supposed to be the giver of wisdom. The government, runs all the hospitals. God's supposed to be our healer. Now, it's not that medicine is bad, but we've allowed government to become the only real source of our medical care and our help, and look at how that worked out for us in COVID. We've committed idolatry. We put government into the place of God. And I think until the church recognizes and repents of idolatry, things are going to continue to get worse. But if the church can recognize its sin, repent, and put God back on the throne, I think we'll see revival, and that's when we'll see genuine positive change.
Do you have faith that that's going to happen?
I have no choice but to have faith. And my philosophy on that is I'm called to be faithful. The results are up to God. Whether anything specific happens in my lifetime, that's entirely up to God. That's not on I don't get to decide that. I just have to be faithful.
And in general, what's Topher up to besides for church and state?
Yeah, so the Aussie Wire. Follow the Aussie Wire, go to theaussiewire.com, and obviously follow Rebel News as well. We're bringing news based on truth, freedom and hope. Those are the three values that guide everything that we do. And we're wanting to really highlight stories that the mainstream media perhaps aren't doing a great job of, where they're either not talking about a story or where they're only taking one side of a story, and we believe there's something valid to be said about another angle, another aspect of that story. That's where we'll then step in and include that in one of our twice weekly episodes of the news. We've done interviews with yourself. You've come on as a guest when there's been something to do with your court cases, or you've covered a story really well at Rebel News, and you've been kind enough to then come on and bring that story on.
You've paid me well.
Well, no, that's right. Just got to send some flatbread, some unleavened bread at the right time of year goes a long way with this man. No, what I'm trying to do is to play my small part in creating a genuine alternative to the mainstream media. We can criticise it all we want, but unless we create an alternative to it, then really people have nowhere to go. And that's what you've been about for years. I've been a political commentator now for 15 years, and finally that's sort of taken shape and taken form in the Aussie Wire.
So how do you feel? Because you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. And how do you feel, especially since COVID? I think COVID was, for me personally, a shift in the way Australians look at every issue. How do you see the last 15 years?
Well, I used to say to people, the frustrating thing about politics is people don't care until it hurts them. The silver lining of COVID, and it was awful and it wasn't worth it, the silver lining doesn't make up for the price, but the silver lining of it is that it hurt a lot of people, and now there's a lot more people paying attention. And we know it's not a majority, we see that. We saw that with the election results in Victoria. Obviously Victorians in quite large numbers re-elected Daniel Andrews, and people jumped online and said, oh, can this be true? Topher, it must have been rigged. I'm like, no, it's worse than that. It wasn't rigged. Like that's the terrifying thought. And so we know we're not a majority, but there is rising and organising a minority, a substantial minority, that are getting active because they got hurt. And unfortunately, that's the prerequisite for most people to start to care about politics. So as awful as that era was, I do believe that there is a silver lining now emerging. And if we can get organised and get sensible and work together, I believe we can genuinely have a massive impact on the future of this country. But it's not going to be the work of a moment. I've said it many times before, I'll say it again now. The battle for freedom was raging long before I was born, and it will continue long after I'm dead. My job is to play my role in this little moment of time while I have breath. And that's it. I don't really have control over the outcome. All I have is control over the role that I choose to play. So I'm just going to do the best that I can.
What would you say to Victorians that, you know, suffered through the pains of lockdowns, and like you said, the scary thing is Victoria overwhelmingly re-elected, and so they've lost hope?
Yeah, hope is a big thing. There's two kinds of hope. There is a stoic hope and there is a joyful hope. And sometimes you have to fall back on the stoic hope. And what I mean by that is that's like the gritted teeth. We can get through this, we can survive, we can live to fight another day type of hope. And that's an important thing to have, the willingness to just duke it out and keep on keeping on. But that's hard work and it's a hard way to live. There's another kind of hope, which is the one that I aspire to. I don't have a lot of it myself, but I aspire to it. And that is joyful hope. And that is the hope of someone who's running a race, who's aiming to win. It's not about staying where you are and not being knocked over. It's about achieving and changing things. And that's the kind of hope that I'm trying to spark in my own heart and that I try to bring into my work at the Aussie Wire. And that's when we can make that transition and start to focus less on survival and being the immovable object and start to focus more on accomplishment and becoming the unstoppable force. That's, I think, when the movement will mature and we'll start to see some progress.
Now, we've gotten all the rubbish out of the way, all the small stuff. Now, some to the serious. What we're really here for is, you see here, we have the top commentators, conservative commentators in the country here at Church and State. Rukshan Fernando, clearly not here. Why is that?
Well, look, I did a four-way slow chat with Rukshan, Senator Ralph Babet and Carly Soderstrom early in the new year. You can find that on the Aussie Wire. And look, honestly, Rukshan just had nothing to say. He just sat there, sipped his gin and tonic, and just he basically just treated me like I was a cheap date, and he just drank my alcohol and said nothing and left. So, look, I think maybe he's just run out of words. He's just run out of things to say, run out of opinions, really. I just think he's just kind of sitting there going, meh, I don't have an opinion. You know?
So you don't think it's anything about the fact that he got beaten up for being my friend?
Look, I get the feeling Rukshan's probably been beaten up all his life. He's just, just that unfortunate schoolyard situation, Now, Rukshan, I love you, I do. Look, can I turn, I know you're trying to be funny, but can I turn serious?
I'm not trying to, I am funny. I am funny.
That was great. That was a good one. Oh, you meant it. Oh, wow. Okay. Moving right along. This hatred that, you've attracted hate ever since you spoke out publicly.
Since I was born.
Yeah, it's basically built into you. But there is this level of hatred directed at you, and that went off the scale as soon as October the 7th happened. It just went through the roof. And now all of a sudden, anyone who's even, like me, by doing this interview now, I'm going to cop hate online, and I know that, and it's like, whatever.
The thing that's unfair about that is you deserved the hate before this interview.
Look, I've actually, it took Victoria Police a long time to get around to arresting me. They had arrested Monica. You'd been arrested like 3 times. You were going for a new high score. And I started to feel this inferiority complex. I'm like, what's wrong with me that you haven't kicked my door in yet? Like, am I not pretty enough? Like, am I not doing good work? So it's a little bit the same. I look at how much hatred you've attracted, and Rukshan gets his fair share. Monica, the trolls on Monica's page. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, guys, come over and feed the algorithm on my page.
You haven't pissed the cookers off enough.
Not enough, no.
Well, and I don't think condemning Rukshan is going to help you. That's the problem.
Yeah, but it's so much fun, I can't help myself.
Thank you for your time. Always good to see you, Topher. And better here now than a few years ago on the streets of Melbourne
Much
in
more
handcuffs.
enjoyable. Not getting shot at. Who knew that not getting shot at would be so fun? Follow Rebel News.
The Aussie Wire. And there you have it. Thank you for spending your break here at the Church and State with me, Avi Yemini from Rebel News.